U.S. forecasters say El Nino weather conditions have arrived, and this year's event is likely to be one of the strongest ever. El Nino is a natural phenomenon that warms surface water temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, changing global wind and rainfall patterns. Scientists expect it to reach historic intensity in the coming months. The UN is warning the world to prepare for the impact of extreme and erratic weather. Matthew Cappucci, we are happy to bring in. He's a meteorologist, reporter, and storm chaser, and he joins us for more on this weather phenomenon. Matthew, El Nino is a term viewers hear every few years, but can you remind us in plain terms what is actually happening in the Pacific Ocean that triggers such widespread disruption around the world?
That's a great question. So El Nino and La Nina are two sides of the same coin. They're opposites. And every 2 to 7 years, it's like a pendulum going back and forth between these two opposites. They make up ENSO, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation, which begins in the Pacific. During an El Nino pattern, you have westerly winds at the equator that push warm surface water eastward. So you wind up with this pool of warm water in the eastern tropical Pacific. It does a couple things. Namely, it warms the air above, causing that air to rise, and in turn kind of influencing the position of key weather systems in the atmosphere. It also affects the oceans. Interestingly, off the west coast of Southern America, you have a reduced upwelling of the cold waters below because they're kind of squashed by that warm water above. So you get, believe it or not, less nutrient-rich water rising and less fishing down there during El Nino patterns. But in any case, the entire world's weather will be influenced by El Nino. El Nino is sort of an expression of heat. You know, you're taking this heat energy that's ordinarily trapped in the ocean and fluxing some of it into the atmosphere, and it is likely that that, coupled with the effects of climate change, will help next year perhaps be the warmest year on record.
And as a result of that uncertainty, we're seeing communities from sub-Saharan Africa to Southeast Asia already bracing for impact. How severe could this one be, and what regions are likely facing the most intense fallout?
Yeah, so El Nino and scrambling weather patterns around the world causes different effects pretty much everywhere you go. In some places, increased risks of flooding, other places, increased risk of drought. As for where it's going to be hotter and drier than average, we're expecting Southeast Asia, Australia, Southern Africa, and perhaps portions of South and Central America as well. Interestingly, the Pacific, meanwhile, will likely see increased hurricane activity because that warm water in the Pacific warms the air above. You get that air to rise. Conversely, in the Atlantic, what goes up must come down. So air begins to sink in the Atlantic, squashing hurricane activity, which is great news for folks like the United States, like the Bahamas, like the Lesser and Greater Antilles, which have been hit hard by hurricanes in recent years. And believe it or not, in the United States, the wintertime, this upcoming winter, likely to be a little warmer than drier than average. But the southern United States, especially Florida, might see increased tornado activity. So it's not even necessarily that the weather's bad everywhere. It's more just kind of a dramatic change, and the fact that this upcoming El Nino is expected to be historically strong since we began record keeping back in 1950 means the impacts will likely be more severe than typical.
Matthew, given what we know about the intensifying relationship between El Nino cycles and climate change, are these events becoming stronger, more frequent, or both? And should we recalibrate what we consider a normal El Nino?
That is one of the best questions I've ever been asked on television. It's so nuanced, and let's break it down. So the way that we categorize an El Nino is based on the water temperature anomalies in this imaginary box in the Pacific called the Nino 3.4 region. Imagine you just drew a big rectangle through the equatorial Pacific. And when water temperatures there are more than half a degree Celsius above average for about 5 months in a row, we say, yeah, an El Nino has begun. However, the tricky part is nowadays the world is warming thanks to climate change, so much so that it's becoming increasingly difficult to parse out the signal of El Nino. You know, what's El Nino warming versus what's ordinary climate warming. So now we as scientists have invented a new index called RONI, or the Relative Oceanic Nino Index, to basically try to separate the water temperature anomalies in that box from averages across the entire world. So that's one thing that's been tricky. But I will say, the effects of human-induced climate change added atop a backdrop of a potentially significant or even record-breaking El Nino will likely push us into record territory for global temperatures this upcoming year. And as we know, when it comes to societal vulnerability, heat extremes are really high up there on the list of things that can affect vulnerable populations.
Interesting and eerie. Finally, Matthew, what should governments and disaster agencies, especially in the developing world where infrastructure is most challenged, what is the single most urgent action they should be taking now while they have time?
I think two things for me come to mind. Number one is agriculture. The fact that El Nino can change precipitation patterns, and in some cases quite dramatically do so, will potentially require some relief. I mean, areas that are typically used to seeing very heavy rainfall may see less or more, or vice versa. So
Mm.
it's going to be down to local level on how governments want to mitigate that and really help out as much as they can. But that's one issue. And then the other one for me is just the fact that we're more likely to have heat extremes. El Ninos oftentimes can exacerbate blocking high pressure systems, and those high pressure heat domes can bring well hotter than average temperatures. The fact that we're more likely to see that in an era where already heat extremes are becoming very taxing on various populations, that concerns me a lot. So I'd say, especially in like Europe, for example, you might need more cooling shelters next summertime as El Nino really becomes entrenched.
Always learn from you. Matthew Capuccio, thank you so much. Cappucci, I should say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries. Thanks again.